Dobrý den. That's the only words in Czech and my name, but I think you'll pronounce it better than I do. So I'll tell you a little bit about the project Vienna Main Station, more than just a railway station is the subtitle. And I'll start with the overview about the project itself, so that you get a little bit of feeling of the dimension of the project, if it's similar to yours, but I think it might be similar. Then I'll talk a little bit about the frame conditions we had, about milestones we made and so on. And last but not least about the internal organization, how we managed the project within the city administration. I forgot to mention I work for the city administration. The department I work on is dealing with zoning plan and land use planning, urban planning, and we are part of the whole administration of the city of Vienna. So first of all, Vienna Main Station, more than just a railway station. One of the aims of the project was to connect three railroad lines going through Vienna to one transport hub. In former days we had head stations in Vienna. Now we have an European railway hub that connects all these lines in one point. It was very important for us to have a modern station building. The old South railway station that stood there was one of the most ugly station buildings in Austria. Now we have a modern state-of-the-art station building which fulfills the criteria of a European transport hub. But we don't only talk about the station building itself. We have a large development area with about 55 hectares. And within these development areas, we built, many of them already finished, about 5,000 flats, maybe it's a little bit more. So living space for about 10,000 to 15,000 people. But not only a place for living and housing, we wanted to create also places to work. So it was one of the aims to get office buildings in this quarter. There are some headquarters, one of an Austrian bank institute, one of the railway company itself, the opposite side of the station building, naturally hotels and so on and so on. So a mixed use quarter. We had the needs of infrastructure, school, technical infrastructure, new roads had to be built, and so on and so on. Naturally, public green areas. The heart of the living area, of the housing area, is a 7-hectare large park, public park, and as well new public transport. One project is the enlargement of a tramway line, for example, but also the connection of the station building to the underground line was a very important topic we had to deal with, because the old station was about 500 meters from the underground off, and now you can go from the station building directly to the underground line. So that's the overview of the project. What were the important frame conditions, milestones? What do you have to keep in mind when you have to deal with such a large project? So first of all, what was very important was the question of ownership. The whole area you see here, so it looked when we started in 2003, was owned more or less by the Austrian Railway Company, a small part by the Austrian Post Company, but at least they bought the parts of the railway company, bought the parts of the post company. So more or less we had one owner. What is, I think, very important, because it makes it easier. to develop such a large area. Another very important step at the beginning was a so-called letter of intent. Why was it important? It was a paper signed by the Federal Ministry of Traffic and Transport, the mayor of the city of Vienna, and the director of the railway company. And it showed that every of the three main partners wanted this project. There were also, at this time, a discussion about financing infrastructure, the urban infrastructure, so it was fixed that the areas the city needed for the park, for the school, for the streets and so on, was given from the railway company to the city for free. So that's one part of this letter of intent. Also in this letter of intent there was fixed figures about density and so on, so that the railway company knew what could be built in this area, because one of the ideas was the ground that can be sold should refinance at least a part of the station building itself. The next step was a master plan based on a urban competition with 10, it was an invited competition with 10 offices. At least 2 offices had to create from their ideas a common master plan, which was a dialogue, a debate between the architects, the railway company, and the city planning that took about half a year. And at the end of this process, the master plan passed the Vienna City Council, and it was a decision of all in our city council. We just this time had 4 parties, and all of the 4 parties said yes to this plan. So it was also a very important step to have the political common sense about this development. What is necessary, I think, when you have a master plan, you have to keep in mind that development of such a large area takes a long time. So there must be some sort of flexibility. So the last version, first master plan was 2004. The last version P, starting by A, was in 2013. Why did we have to change it? There were some special needs of investors. For example, the headquarters of the railway company. They didn't knew at the beginning of the project that they will build their headquarters there. So we didn't know the needs, the exact needs, and there was an architectural competition, and naturally this had some impacts on the master plan. And there are some other examples for it. Also, the question of land use in the beginning, in the original master plan, we had an area at the east side which was housing on one side and office production logistic on the other side. Later on, we had a finance crisis. So production logistic wasn't an aim anymore, but we had the problem of a growing city. We needed space for housing and so on. So we decided to create this quarter into a living quarter, housing quarter, which is actually now under construction. So this was the last part. Also, might be interesting that the way of planning has changed in these 10 years, or the different approaches. On the left side, you see the competition entries of the competition 2004, and this is the plan created for this quarter on the east side, which was the last quarter planned or developed. This was not a classical competition, but it was a sort of a dialogue-orientated process. So planners didn't plan each for each other, but they discussed about it. And this is a very, I like this picture because it shows the different ways of going on with planning, of going on with planning together, planning in dialogue. Last but not least, also other things can change here. For example, the topic traffic. In the original master plan, we talked classical about traffic, how broad must the road be to have enough space for the cars and so on. And now we talk about modern mobility, the different forms of mobility, e-scooters and car sharing, electromobility, and so on and so on. Last but not least, what was very important from and I think it's important from the beginning of such a project, is communication with the public. You have to transport the benefits, you have to discuss critical questions with the public. You will have the need to explain certain developments, because we had a discussion of the high-rise buildings here, because they are not in the direct neighborhood of the city center, but there is a Baroque castle, the Castle Belvedere, and the small distance was some sort of discussion if there can be high-rise buildings. So that's one part of the discussion. And very important, I think, and a great success was the information center that was built up at the neighborhood of the building site, where people could inform themselves about the project, and this wooden tower where you had a view about over the building plot, not only the building plot but also the city itself. So this tower was a very, very great success. Other forms were platforms with local politicians. We have here the station itself is in the 10th district. We have here the 3rd and the 4th district. So there were discussions with politicians of all these districts to keep them also involved in the project. Last but not least, in internal organization. As I said, I'm working for the urban planning department. At the beginning, our department was very important. We managed more or less the project within the city of Vienna for the first 2 or 3 years. Later on, there started an organization, a real project management, and it started like this. Maybe those who know project management, maybe those who hate them, I show it because I think it's necessary when you deal with a project. So in the middle you have the project itself, you have the surroundings, you have the politicians of the city government, of the districts. You have on this side you have the stakeholders, so which was the railway company at the beginning, but then several investors, because the railway company sold the plots part by part to very different investors, and every investor had its own ideas, and it was a permanent discussion to get them on the road. Yeah, that's more or less this picture. And then there was the management itself, also a head of the project. And here you see the administration. So we had planning, that's me. We had the technical infrastructure in this project. Traffic, finance was also involved. We had controlling and the communication. On the other side, we have the stakeholders. So again, the railway company, this other investors, the so-called Wohn for Wien, which deals with subsidized housing, which was also one of the aims in this project. Again, the politicians, city and district side. Also a picture just to show. I don't read this now, but just to show how complex this project is within a city, because you have questions of management, you have questions, at last we had questions of legal affairs, because we had to do a zoning plan for this project, we had environmental assessment and so on and so on. But also not legal affairs, also the urban planning is in this area. We had the very large part of infrastructure, and last but not least, communication with public, with other stakeholders, with politicians, and so on and so on. So maybe at last, I will read that, or not really read, because some recommendations or things, maybe better said, I have learned, because when I started in 2004 in the city administration, also the project started, so it was for me also a project where I learned very much. So what might be important when you develop a place like this, and I think from the dimension your project is similar, from the tasks you have also the problem, the aim to organize the railway station and at the same time the city development. First of all, I wrote partnership is very important. You have all stakeholders must be partners in the project, stakeholders and planners as well. There must be, there should be, there will be many of discussions and debates, but I would recommend to do it in the team. It's dangerous to do discussion in the public. So first I would recommend to debate the things and then present the plan in the public. Naturally, when we talk about planning, it's the urban quality. For us, it was important to have a quarter with mixed use, not only housing, but also office buildings, retail, and so on and so on. An attractive green area, an attractive public space, so a place where people feel well. State of the art when you deal with questions of mobility. Climate change is actually a topic we are very concerned about, and so on and so on. As I mentioned, communication, which not only means communications between the partners, but only a transparent communication to the public. What are the benefits for the public? What's the positive aspects of your project? And what might be, think about what might be problems, what might be topics people could be interested in. So prepare about critical questions. Project management, I think it's very important to identify or define the main aims and milestones of your project. For us, and I think as I talked to Mr. Selacek, it's similar in Brno, was one main aim that the velocity of urban development and the building of the train stations should go hand in hand. At last the train station was a little bit faster, but there must be the infrastructure, and at least some of the building plots should be finished when the train station is finished as well. but that means to have timelines according to the station building, according to the technical infrastructure that has to be managed by the city, according to the building sites that has to be managed by private partners. Risk management, controlling, and so on and so on. So the slides about project management may be a little bit boring, but I learned that the methods of project management are very important and can help you when you have to deal with such a large project. Yeah, as I mentioned, I want to record the topic flexibility. Keep in mind that the development of this dimension takes time. You have to react on changing frame conditions and so on. And it might be, yeah. And at last, it's empathy. You need people who identify with this area, who identify with this project. I had the feeling you do identify with this project because that's, I think, the most important thing. But you also need this on the side of the stakeholders, of the investors, of the private investors. You need those people in the politic and so on and so on. Yeah, that's all I think.